Welcome back, and thanks for still being there. Now, let's take a look at other issues the lawmakers considered in the National Assembly this week.
The Senate Joint Committee on Customs and Marine Transport has disclosed that it has recovered 140 billion naira from some banks and companies in the course of its investigation into revenue leakages in the Nigeria Customs Service. The Senate had in November 2016 mandated its Committee on Custom and Excise to investigate the activities of the Nigerian Customs Service with the aim of identifying leakages and irregularities in the service as well as the import and export sector. The chairman of the Joint Committee, Senator Hope Uzodimma, who presented an interim report on the investigation, told lawmakers that the recovered 140 billion naira has been remitted to the Central Bank of Nigeria with evidence of payment. He says during investigations, the committee identified major sources of revenue losses in the import and export value chain from undervaluation of goods, wrong tariff classification, and abuse of waivers and concessions.
The committee immediately identified the following leakage channels as the major sources of revenue losses in the import and export value chain. 1. Origin fraud involving false declaration of country of origin in order to secure illegal access to preference tariff regimes, just like the zero rate duty on applicable ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme. These infractions within the system disproportionately distort the economic profile of the country and place extensive pressures on the nation's scarce foreign exchange. It also negates all Central Bank of Nigeria initiated foreign exchange management plans. This is because a distorted forex requirement does not essentially reflect the actual forex needs of individuals and businesses in the country. The situation benefits only the purveyors of capital flight from the country and has absolutely no value to the nation.
And during the week, the National Assembly received the 2018-2020 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy paper as sent by President Muhammadu Buhari. In the letter read by the Speaker of the House, Yakubu Dogara, the President stated that the documents were prepared against the backdrop of a generally adverse global economic uncertainty. Planned spending is also said to be at prudent and sustainable levels, consistent with the government's overall developmental objectives and inclusive growth. The President also appealed to the House to quickly approve that document in order to bring the 2018 budget preparation process to a timely closure.
Pursuant to provisions of the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, the preparation towards the submission of 2018 budget to the National Assembly is progressing well. MTEF and FSP were prepared against the backdrop of a generally adverse global economic uncertainty, as well as physical challenges and recovery in the domestic economy, to ensure that planned spending is set at prudent and sustainable levels and is consistent with government's overall developmental objectives and inclusive growth. I hereby forward the 2018-2020 MTEF and FSP to the House of Representatives and trust that it will be kindly considered and approved expeditiously in order to bring the 2018 Federal Government of Nigerian budget preparation process to a timely closure.
The House also urged the Presidential Amnesty Committee to, without further delay, award scholarships to all candidates who have qualified for admissions into the 2017-2018 academic session of universities. Representative Koladi Akinjo, in a motion before the House, encouraged the federal government to continue to prioritize the educational aspect of the amnesty program in view of its importance to the national economy. He said this is important as adequate provision has been made for them in the 2017 Appropriation Act.
Aware that the program has greatly helped to empower and equip beneficiaries with skills to enable them compete globally in various fields and in the positive attitudinal changes of the ex-militants are largely attributable to the training and education they acquired through this program. Concerned that the inexplicable delay by the Presidential Amnesty Committee to award scholarship to qualified candidates for admission into the 2017/2018 academic section of universities could encourage acts that may threaten the relative peace that is currently being experienced in the Niger Delta region and consequently have adverse effects on the nation's economy as a whole.
The Senate is set to probe the Paris Club refund released so far by President Muhammadu Buhari to state government and find out why state government, which benefited from the Paris Club refund, have continued to owe workers' salaries. The federal government had last week released details of the second tranche of Paris Club refund to states, totaling around 243.8 billion naira. The chairman of the committee, Senator Shehu Sani, at a meeting with officials of the Ministry of Finance to discuss President Buhari's request for external borrowing of $5.5 billion, sought to know why revenues from local sources cannot be used to fund the 2017 budget. But a Director General of the Debt Management Office justified the borrowing plan, explaining that it is cheaper to borrow from external sources compared to the domestic market.
It has become clear that if Nigeria must borrow, we must borrow responsibly. We cannot afford to mitigate the future of the unborn generation. If we must bequeath to the future generation a pile of debt, it must be justified with commensurate infrastructural proof of the value of the debt. The payment plan of this debt will undoubtedly last the length of our lifetimes and possibly beyond. We must leave behind a legacy that will appease and answer the questions the next generation of Nigerians will ask.
It's not the first time that government is borrowing long term. What we should take away, sir, is they're going into projects whose benefits are long term. The roads don't go away, the schools don't go away, the hospitals don't go away. All that we may need to do is maintain them after this. So that's the explanation I'd like to give to that. And let me clarify that for that 2.5 billion, which is new borrowing, it is actually new borrowing to fund the deficit. So even if we have environment, it doesn't remove the fact that there was a deficit in the budget that needs to be financed. That's why I'm separating the two, the 2.5. The 3 billion, which is the new borrowing to refinance local debt. Let me quickly clarify that there's no default here. There's no debt service, there's no deferred interest. We don't have a single record of any default on debt service or deferring payment. We are not deferring any payment.
The House of Representatives has conducted a public hearing on a bill seeking to establish a regulatory framework for the water resources sector in Nigeria. The bill also provides for equitable and sustainable development, management, use and conservation of surface and groundwater resources. The chairman of the Committee on Water Resources, Representative Aliu Pategi, assured those that attended of the committee's willingness to ensure speedy passage of the bill for effective supply of water to Nigerians.
What we expect from you is to cross the T's, dot the I's, bring in your submissions. We will look at it dispassionately and ensure that as we swear to the oath, that we will only do those things that we promote the peace, happiness, and the general well-being of the people. We will reflect the best of what you give us in this act.
Well, a lot of talking points there. The medium-term expenditure framework is now with the lawmakers, so their time starts now. I'm sure you remember that the plan is to ensure that the 2018 budget is passed and signed into law before the end of this year. This is just the first part in that process. And the Paris Club refund continues to attract different reactions. What is your own position? Should state governments explain why they continue to owe workers' salaries despite collecting the refund? Well, let's hear from you and get your perspective on these and other issues that we've brought up today. Well, this is where we draw the curtains today. Thanks for staying with us and take care.